そうだ。
Wow, I had my mic muted this entire time. I'm such a dumbass. Whoopsies. Okay, so... Now, let me try this again. Hello, this is my PB. Yeah, my mic was muted. There's a little mistake there talking to the kid the second time. So this is just some general tutorial stuff for the start of this run. This one ended up being my first sub 1 hour run with Cyrus, which I really would have liked to have gotten on stream, but I woke up and I was just like, I have an hour and 20 minutes to kill, I might as well just do a couple attempts. So here I'm just picking up a bunch of stuff and getting ready for the first dungeon. I don't think I've actually done a full commentated run of this game, like actually explaining things, because kind of one of the difficult things with this game is there's a lot to the systems of this game, and if you haven't played it, don't quite make a lot of sense. So right here, just hitting first enemy, which is scripted. It's always going to be this one-eye sentinel with a single staff hit, and then this game has a system similar to like Bravely Defaults, where every single turn you get what is called a BP, and unless you use BP, you'll get one every single turn. And the way it works is you can tap the right bumper, and it'll boost your the next thing you do. If you attack, you will attack as many times as BP that you use plus 1. If you use a spell, it enhances the damage for each BP you use, or if it's a healing spell, it actually increases the healing, but we're never going to actually use healing spells. Anyways, so the whole combat system here, kind of like SMT, the idea is you break an enemy by hitting its weakness, and it will actually skip the enemy's turn. And when an enemy is broken, they have one turn where they will not do anything, plus the turn that you break them. They take more damage, and they're just completely docile, but the next turn after that, they will always attack first. So this actually ends up being a way to manipulate certain enemies. So right here, this is the boss of Cyrus' first chapter, Russell and a pair of icicles. The icicles are weak to fire, and Russell is weak to ice. So you're going to see me breaking the 2 icicles with a fire spell. And breaking them with a 3rd rank fire spell does a lot of damage. Did I get good frogs in Yvonne? You'll see. So, there are also these really useful items here called Soul Stones, which do a flat amount of damage, and actually a pretty decent amount of damage. The boss here is also weak to Cyrus' default weapon, which is Staff. Every single first boss in this game is weak to one of that character's respective weapon types. And I think this is just to kind of serve as like a tutorial for this is an important part of this game. You really want to break enemies here. So breaking an enemy happens when the shield next to their next to the little bar underneath the enemy hits 0. And you can tell whenever an enemy is broken because they have the little stars above their heads. Here I'm using a light soul stone. If an enemy is not broken, it does 200 damage. If they are, it does 400. There's several different elements of soul stone that correspond to various different elements of the game. Anyways, right here I got good turn order, so I hit the boss several times with the staff to break it immediately, and then use my remaining BP to do one really powerful fireball, which is just about enough to kill him. Now, I did some grinding before I fought this guy to get Cyrus to level 3, but also I wanted to get him to 15 JP. This is very, very important, because when Cyrus gets 30 JP, which he'll get an additional 15 after he beats the boss, he gains the ability to learn his first skill, which we really want to get Lightning Blast, which is a 2-hit, 22 MP skill of the Thunder element. And this is really useful because there are several enemies that are broken by this skill. and it hits twice. So, anyway, to touch on kind of the story here, Cyrus is basically a tutor for the princess and several other people in this several other nobles in this town. And one of the nobles accuses Cyrus of trying to have a fling with her, the princess specifically. And so Cyrus is exiled from the town, and Cyrus is like, well, I wanted to go anyway. I need to investigate this ancient, dark, powerful grimoire that I found. And that's really basically his story. The characters' stories in these games vary in terms of depth, but they're generally fairly shallow. So on this screen, there's a decent chance I'll get an encounter. But I actually didn't here, which is really solid luck. And here we're coming to an area called Whistlewood, which enemies here are really, really dang strong, and I would get one shot ordinarily. So this is a very bad encounter. I need specific enemies in this area in order to proceed, because I need to get enough JP with Cyrus to get his second skill, which is specifically I need at least 100. So I'm going to take a death here and try again with Whistlewood. So kind of one of the neat things with this game is that you can go to areas well above your level at any time. The caveat to this, of course, being if you find an enemy, you're very unlikely to escape and you're probably going to die. And if you die, you can just use the game's autosave system, but you don't get anything that you got before you died. Thankfully, in these fights, unless I get surprise attacked, I will always get my first turn here, and I really wanted to see either two of those worms or owls. By getting those two worms, I get enough JP to learn a second skill. I use Firestorm as like one safety option for later. It doesn't matter that much, but what makes this so important is Cyrus, when he gets his second spell, he also gets access to his first support skill, which is Evasive Maneuvers. And Evasive Maneuvers is the most useful skill in the entire run. What it does is it doubles the amount of steps that I can take on a screen before I get an encounter. Essentially, I would have already gotten an encounter on this screen, but because I have Evasive Maneuvers, I can guarantee my way through that screen with 0 encounters. On this screen, it's pretty unlikely. The way it works is when you enter a room, there is a set number of steps that you can take before it gets you an encounter. Somebody in the Discord calculated it anywhere between 55 and 85 based on just like the little step sound effect that plays whenever your character takes a step. And it's a little bit more front-leaning, meaning that it's more likely to be between 55 and 70 than it is to be 70 and 85. There I just broke the enemy and then ran away. If you break an enemy or or you surprise them, your first turn you guarantee an escape. So now that I have Evasive Maneuvers, I really want to be able to speed these things up. I also want to be able to grab resources for later. So this town here is Ripple-Tide, and this is where we'll get the second character, which is Tressa. There are 8 playable characters in this game, but we only need a party of 4, and we only want the ones that are most useful to clearing this character fast. This being a single story run, the goal is just to complete Cyrus's 4th chapter, rather than completing everybody's 4th chapters, and completing your main character's 4th chapter gets you the credits, so it's deemed a complete playthrough, essentially. I'm just trying to get an escape here. This enemy's not worth bothering. But you'll see that I'm basically just using Cyrus to roam around the world and not really do much beyond to get things. And this is because I really need one particular item in a much later game area, which happens to be a large soulstone. And along the way, there are several checkpoints, because this game actually has a world map that you can use checkpoints to warp between. In this case, I'm going to the first town of several characters that I will be getting later. So this being where I would get Ulrich, and I'll be picking him up shortly after I pick up Dressa. So this is just kind of showcasing how useful evasive maneuvers is. I would definitely have gotten several encounters by now if I didn't have the ability. So now this is where it gets really dangerous. In fact, on this screen I'm going to be using a safety strat, or I used a safety strat, which is I head to this south loading zone here, because I need to get to the far east end of that particular screen, and trying to go from the northwest to the east side, there is a decently high chance that I will get an encounter, and the enemies here will one-shot me. And if that happens, I lose a lot more time than I would take just hitting that loading zone, so take a small loss to avoid a big loss here. This is Stone Guard. Stone Guard is Cyrus's third chapter, where we'll be coming to much later, but it's also a very useful vantage point for getting to several useful items later on in the run. And as you can see, once I get to this next screen, the areas that I'm getting to start to get particularly high level. This isn't even an area you're really supposed to go to, quote-unquote, until after, basically, until you get to kind of the post-game scenarios, really. In that chest was a large soulstone, which is going to be extremely useful, but along the way we're also getting to this area called Shrine of the Runeblade. Shrine of the Runeblade gets me a secret class, but I would have to defeat a boss to get it, and I am not nearly powerful enough to defeat this boss. What's useful, however, is this treasure chest in the way back contains a really large sum of money, and money is the most important thing for this entire run. You just need heaps of it. This here is Dressa. She's our second character that we're going to be picking up. Also arguably the most broken for combat purposes, just by virtue of having the best class in the game, which is Merchant. At least as far as speedruns go, the Merchant class is really good. Now her whole deal is she needs to beat up some pirates who are robbing the people of her town. That's pretty much it. So Cyrus's stories are the only ones that are going to matter for this run. Each single story run of this game just does each separate character's 4 chapters, and then the chapter 1s of every character that they get along the way, because you need to clear that first chapter. In order to actually even be able to leave the town. Also, I apologize, just given that this is a local recording and I don't have a particularly good setup for replaying local recordings. The music isn't as loud and clear as it could be. So one thing you'll actually notice here is that a lot of the dungeons in this game are extremely small and compact. I believe this was just the nature of this game being a Nintendo Switch title, and the intent of having a game on the Switch is kind of, it has this little portable accessibility, so you can kind of just go in, do a dungeon, and be done with it in a relatively short time span, which kind of fits a portable game pretty well, given that it's generally play on the go. So this is me using the Light Soulstone now. This is supposed to be a late game item that does a flat 2700 damage or 5400 to a broken enemy. If an enemy is weak to it, they take an additional, like, third of the damage as well. But these two enemies only have about 2300 and 2000 HP, respectively. So taking them out in one turn is just the fastest way to go. One nice thing about this game is it has a cutscene skip, which is really handy given that this game does have quite a few cutscenes. So you just hold down the B button and it skips a cutscene in about 5 seconds. Depending on loads, of course. So we're going to leave Ripple-Tide here because we need to actually do this in order to formally end Tressa's Chapter 1, but we need to head right back into Ripple-Tide. The reason for this is there is an NPC in here that we can use Tressa's overworld action, which is purchasing. And this woman sells medium Thunder Soulstone, but also if I scrutinize her with Cyrus's action, she tells me the location of a hidden large Thunder Soulstone. So now I have everything in Ripple-Tide, and since I set up a warp point to Cobblestone here, I can just come here immediately. And this is where we'll pick up Ulberic, who is not usually picked up in several of the routes. He happens to be particularly useful to Cyrus because he's on the way, and Cyrus's final boss is weak to several physical weapons, including Ulberic's. Usually little minutiae like that are why we pick the characters after we get Cyrus and Tressa, because it's usually going to be those two. Tressa is in every single route, Cyrus is in most of them. And so right here I'm actually walking slowly, and if you walk slowly, it lowers the chance of getting an encounter just a little bit than if you're just running the entire time. So one thing I got after I cleared Nick and Mac, the boss from Tressa's Chapter 1, is they give me a high Soulstone medium guaranteed, which is just enough damage to one-shot these enemies here. Hello, Snowion. How you doing today, buddy? So there is no chance of getting an encounter on this screen, but there was on the previous one. So you see me just sprinting this entire time. The boss here has 4,000-ish HP, but he's also weak to Thunder and Wind, which means that I can use my Thunder Soulstone. Or he's weak to Thunder, which means my Thunder Soulstone Large will do an additional 800 damage. And the second Soulstone will do enough to kill him. Hey Ninja, how you doing? Yeah, I'm just narrating over my offline PB. I really wanted to get this PB on stream, as you saw from my nearly 5-hour stream of just playing this game and grinding out attempts. So this wasn't the cleanest PB, but, you know, mistakes happen. I should probably also mention I really had to use the bathroom from, like, the 12-minute mark onwards, so the entire run I was really on edge. I'm like, well, we gotta run past Whistlewood, so I'm obligated to finish this, but yeah. I could probably attribute at least one mistake to just not being as focused as I could. Anyway, this is the Sunshade Lands. This is the best song in the game, and I will fight anyone. I will physically fight anyone who says otherwise. Unless they say Clearbrook, because that is the second best song in the game. So I'm just grabbing things along the way, mainly to sell. Most of them aren't particularly useful. It's coming into Sunshade here. Unfortunately, this is the only time we really visit this place, so we don't get to hear the full Sunshade song, which is another great song. But it's really useful as a warp point for later. I really like this song. So on this screen, there's a decent chance of getting an encounter along the way. I usually will slow down at the end, but I ended up getting through here basically almost the entire, running almost the entire time. Anyway, so where we're headed next is we're headed to Quarry Crest, which is Cyrus's Chapter 2 location. It's also Tress's, but that's not important. And this happens to be along the way for us getting our 4th party member, so we're just going to take a quick detour here, grab some stuff, set up a warp point along the way, and then we're going to head off to go grab our 4th party member, which is Therian. How did Mermelia's run go? It went phenomenally. Like, he has an insane PB, and he was kind of keeping up with that for a good portion of the run. He also got really lucky and got a Kate, which is like the game's metal slime, if you're familiar with Dragon Quest stuff. That, like, enemy with really low HP, extremely high defense, and a propensity to run, but, like, when you kill it, it gives you really good rewards. He found one of those in his GDQ run, which was kind of insane, and didn't really suffer from bad luck very much in the run, so it went really well. Here we're just taking care of several of Cyrus's story parts. So I'm trying to figure out information about where several incidents in this town are happening. Turns out it's all in the mine, sewers. There's a mine and a sewers, those are separate. Yeah, this town's kind of a shady, backwater, corrupt village. It's definitely worth checking out, Tiny Tim. I'd recommend checking out the mod. I think that's on YouTube by now. So yeah, this is just a recurring theme in Cyrus's chapters. Talk to a bunch of people and then figure things out. I already know the answers, but even if I didn't, you can just kind of trial and error it. It pays in terms of time. Yes, Ozzy, I'm streaming at 12 o'clock noon. What a shocker. Anyways, now that we're all done with this first section, we're only going to return to Quarry Crest once we have a bunch more resources. And really, we're going to start to highlight how broken this game is when we get there. For the time being, it's just a warp point. So right here, it's like 90% to get an encounter. And really just comes down to being able to run away. These enemies are no danger, but they're just a time loss. Hey, Kittles. How you doing there? Yes, it's that run. So even though I killed those enemies, I just escaped because it's not worth dealing with the results screen and getting virtually nothing of value from it. So this is Therian. He's a thief, which is really useful because he has several extremely valuable skills, both in combat and out of combat. Out of combat, his main skill is that he can open purple chests, which are locked otherwise. And in combat, he has several useful debuffs, including damage debuff, armor debuff, and no, he doesn't have the speed debuff. That's something else. But he does have damage and armor debuffs. So right here, what I'm actually doing is returning to the title screen and loading an autosave. So this game autosaves after every room. And one of the big things that makes this useful, not only if I die, I can just, go back to the previous screen, but in this instance, I actually can reset the encounter rate. So in this dungeon, the number of steps you take is, it starts at the beginning of this dungeon, but it doesn't change on every single screen. So I would have had an encounter on this screen had I not done that, and it's slightly faster to load a save than it is to get an encounter here. That's probably to be expected. I could lower the game volume a little bit. I'm speaking a little louder than I usually do, so it's not as much of an issue, thankfully. Anyways, so I used the Thunder Soulstone Large there to kill the minion immediately. And then I picked up several smaller Soulstones, because this guy has, I want to say, a little over 5,000 HP, and these 3 Soulstones do enough to kill him in 1 turn. The more characters you have, the stronger the Chapter 1 bosses are, up until you have your 4th. So, that's kind of why these are ratted as such. We used to grab Therian 3rd and grab another character 4th, and that boss didn't require as many Soul Stones. Also, I really like the Boulderfall music. This whole section from, like, when you get out of Cobblestone to the sewers in Cyrus' Chapter 2, it's just amazing song after amazing song, and I love it. So, once again, we're setting up a another warp point, because we just happen to conveniently be decently close to it already. And that is a town called Duskbarrow in the far northwest. The enemies here are incredibly dangerous. But that also happens to be where Cyrus' Chapter 4 is, so setting up the warp point to there sooner rather than later is really helpful. Not to mention that there's several really useful items in the town of Duskbarrow, as well as a treasure chest that has a lot of money in it. So this right here is where we actually get the first of 2 subclasses that we unlock. Different routes use different subclasses for different purposes. And this one's really useful because it gives us the Hunter subclass. And the Hunter subclass gives us a skill that allows us to repeatedly hit an enemy with bows, and it also gives us a skill called Leghole Trap later, which makes it so that the enemy will always act last on the turns that it is afflicted with the status. So right here actually happens to be one of the first big mistakes of the run. So these guys have a lot of HP. And I think in the time that this happened, I thought that these guys were the enemies from a previous screen. So this was a mistake to just blow my Wind Soulstone like that. It doesn't matter. I would have probably just tried to run, and they would have killed me anyways. So the time loss is very negligible from doing that anyways. Getting an encounter on that screen is just really bad. It's nearly certain death. And then once again, we get an encounter here. I think this game is set that you just kind of get... If this happens once, it tends to happen twice, is what I've noticed. Like the RNG just gets kind of set, like, based on how you enter a screen. That's just my hypothesis on this, because it tends to be when something happens and it screws me over, it happens again and again in the same run. So I do get this 3rd try. Unfortunately, the cost is about 1.5 minutes, so most of my lead right now is just gone. So once again, using the save and load trick to reset the encounter rate. I say set the encounter rate, but it's more like set the step count again. Technically, it's a little of A, little of B, because it's not quite the same as it is with other RPGs. So we're going to take a quick little detour to grab this chest, which is gives me an item that's worth a decent chunk of money. And then now we're in Dusk Barrow, which is kind of where this run will eventually come to an end. I'm going to buy this because I can sell this later for about 6,000 in profit. A chest here for 30,000, and then another antique, which will also be good to sell. So now we're going back to Stoneguard, which is all the way on the southeast, and where we're going to do Cyrus Chapter 3 a little bit later. But as I mentioned, this section is a really good vantage point for some really useful things. So taking it slow there, because I really didn't want to get an encounter. And now we're on the Mooncrest coast. And what's really useful here is just a single shrine that we're saving here because we cannot make it to the shrine from that loading zone without getting an encounter. Moonstruck Coast. Oh my god. Can't even remember the names of things. And so this is the Shrine of the Merchant. It's incredibly useful to get a second merchant subclass. Well, Shrine of the Trader, but they call the class the Merchant sometimes. Or they call it the Merchant subclass. I don't know why they call it both Trader and Merchant here. So now we warp back to Stoneguard because we need to head south, and that, I believe, is one of the last screens where I'm at any considerable danger to get into an encounter. Yes, as Ozzy says in chat, the Merchant subclass ultimately becomes pay to win, but you need ludicrous sums of money that you build up throughout the run. This right here is just a mechanical mistake, and I suffer kind of greatly for it. And so with Cyrus dying there, that's just kind of the worst case scenario. This was just a mistake. This shouldn't have happened, so that was my bad. Anyway, so we're able to make an escape, which is fine. We only really need one character alive, and thankfully none of these screens are really any danger of getting an encounter unless I mess up, which I'm not going to do that again. I blame really having to use the bathroom during this part of the run. Thankfully, when Cyrus is dead, his evasive maneuvers passive skill is still active. This is not true of everything else. If you try and unlock a chest without Therian being alive, it doesn't let you do so, which is actually a mistake that I briefly make here. But this dungeon, really late game dungeon, has an interesting little quirk, which is that if you try and fight this boss and then say no, it actually resets the encounter rate. And what that means is, once again, I can navigate here without running into any risk of getting an encounter. Those olives aren't particularly useful for anything, so the fact that I have them in my inventory inventory is just whatever, and I can just burn them right then and there. And so this is the first instance of me reclassing some of my characters and giving them a second job. The game does have a job system after all, but don't really need to use it until about the dungeon after this. I just take care of the menu all in one go right now. And the most important part of that menu was I taught the skills Armor Corrosive and Hired Help. Hired Help is the merchant skill that you will see in action very shortly, and Armor Corrosive does basically what it says in the tin, lowering enemies' armor. Actually, didn't need to save there, just kind of a force of habit. And so this is Gideon, Cyrus' Chapter 2 boss. He's kind of a mad scientist, kind of doing human sacrifice. So first I use Armor Corrosive on the boss, because this will mean that my next skill will do a lot of damage. Cyrus' turn isn't really needed, and then I use Defend here, which puts my character to first in the turn order the next turn. And so, merchants have this skill called Hired Help, which, if you spend the most money, it does the most damage. And every VP you use is an extra hit with this skill. So as you can see by me doing thousands upon thousands of damage in a single turn, this is really, really powerful. It's a very... It's a ridiculously good skill because its damage is flat, meaning no matter how low level your character is, it will always basically do about the same damage. It does mean that it does have, like, an upper ceiling, but it doesn't really matter for a single story run that much. And so, it costs 30,000 gold, which means I can only use it so many times, and I need an absolute truckload of money to be able to defeat this game's, or this chapter's bosses with it. I forgot to turn my switches offline. So the next place we head to is an optional town by the name of Saintsbridge. I believe one of the other characters goes to Saintsbridge for story purposes, but Cyrus is not one of them. The main thing that Saintsbridge provides, apart from a couple of soul stones and items that we want to pick up, is it provides a shop which sells an incredibly useful item, which is an equipment that it goes to the accessory slot, which I don't have any accessories of right now. And 2 of these will increase my HP by 1,000 for each character, which means that I can actually survive hits from later game enemies. Make a little shopping error here. I need to buy these 2 healing great punches because they're cheap and they heal the entire party for a decent sum of damage. Given that I don't have Ophelia or any of the priest characters, or sorry, Ophelia or the priest subclass given to any of my characters, I don't have any healing spells. So I scrutinize this guy, and he will give me better, he will tell me how to get better stuff at the shop, which includes the accessory that I need. And he also sells a Wind Soul Stone Large, which again, those do really good flat damage. So here I'm selling off everything that I've picked up so far. A couple of menu mistakes here. So So it gives me 1000 HP, but I need to heal my allies. And right now we're also going to pick up a couple more really useful support skills. And also teach Ulbrich and Cyrus skills that they're going to need for the final boss. By teaching them these skills, it increases Cyrus' chance of going early, and it also gives Ulbrich a chance to cover, which is kind of just there to mitigate some of the randomness in this part. This was just a mistake here. If you end up accidentally saying no to doing a chapter, it takes about 15 seconds to go to the barkeep and have them start the chapter properly. Just a small time loss. It's more just a mistake than anything. So in this town is a guy who can translate the book that we, not translate, but has info about a book that we're looking for, this dark, evil grimoire. And so we need to investigate the people in town who know the guy, and of course the guy was tasked with translating this, but in the process he ended up losing his daughter, so he's kind of just become a hermit. Anyways, he gives us information about where to go next, which is we need to go to the mansion at the north end of this town. And this mansion also happens to be the home of the headmaster of our academy, Yvonne. So, the plot thickens, if only ever so slightly. So this mansion just kind of sucks. There's a decent chance of getting an encounter before the boss, and it's very likely death. That is about the worst place to get the encounter, because it's just before the save point. And once again, these enemies are so powerful that a large soulstone will just not do anything here. Like, this part of the game that they don't recommend you attempt it in a casual playthrough until you're about level 45, just as kind of a frame of reference for how far in they intend for you to go. And so this boss fight is where a lot of the run really comes down to. His name is Yvonne. Basically becomes a supercharged monster, and if his allies ever use Tornado, I'm screwed. Or if they all team up on one character, or if they all team up on Ulbrich specifically, because Ulbrich can cover anyone else. That's bad. Thankfully, this actually ends up being first try Yvonne, which is what I need to kind of turn this run around. But yeah, you can just get really unlucky here. So the two guys in front are weak to, they're weak to the Merchant's 800 gold summon, but they're also weak to Thunder, which means that I can break them right on this turn here. So, using Armor Corrosive again to lower the boss's defense. And we're defending with Ulbrich because this means that he'll have 3 DP on this turn that he can use to use the Dancer, 2,500 merchant hired help, which will also break Yvonne, which means I can just kind of wail on him with Soul Stones for now. So one of the quirks to the many bosses of this game that kind of lets the speedrun doable is if you do a decent amount of damage, when a boss comes out of being broken, they will spend a turn buffing their shields and charging up, but they won't actually attack, which is really good here because my characters are 1 hit away from death. So getting a little unlucky here on the collect. Merchants in this game have a collect skill, which lets them just take money. It's similar to stealing, but stealing only steals items in this game, which is Therian and slash Deep Blast skill. So Yvonne is weak to staff and knife. And with him being weak to knife, I hit him 3 times there, and then we finally get the collect, which means I can defend with Cyrus, and then on his next turn, I will swing staff and strike the boss. Hey, Kirby. So I defend with Ulbrich to get the extra DP on the next turn, so that when I get my final hired help here, it will do enough damage to kill him. This is a really stupid boss. Nobody who runs this character likes this boss. So getting it first try here is really nice. Filthy sellout, paying to win here. I know, right? This whole game is just pay to win. Not literal money, but like in-game money. So now that we're done with pretty much every bit of collecting here, all I have to do is go off to Dusk Barrow. And this is where the run will basically end. But very quickly, I need to give 2 more skills to Therian so that he can get his final support skills. One of which makes him more likely to go first, or like increases his speed specifically, and the other gives him an extra attack, which is really useful because I need to break Cyrus's Chapter 4 boss on a specific turn, and to do that I need to also, along the way, I need to also hit the boss almost 30 times with its weaknesses. Thankfully it's weak to most physical things. Hey Rex. How you doing? So this screen actually does have a chance to get an encounter, I recently learned. It's very low, but it really, really sucks when it happens. Right here in this chest is an additional 50,000 gold, which, along with the 12,000 you get from beating Yvonne, you get just enough to be able to cast Hired Help's most powerful summon. I say summon, but you're basically paying for really powerful mercenaries. And I get just enough to do it twice, and then when I steal from, or collect from the boss, you're basically stealing, it does it a 3rd time. I've had the game offline in the background for a while. Just kind of ready to start. Anyways, grabbing an extra healing grape here for safety purposes. And then there's one other soul stone here, and then because I need at least 3 in this boss fight, otherwise it gets a little tricky. Hope you had fun at ATDQ, man. Press plus to hear travel banter. Yeah, no, that's a time loss. Alright, so this is Lucia. She's not nearly as bad as Yvonne, but she can just straight up kill my run. Thank you. So, because both my merchants are going first, I have the opportunity to use use 1,000 spears and hit the boss several times. It's unlikely for all the hits to connect, but it usually gets a higher than average yield. Yeah, you had to have seen Oro and Mamgar suffering from this boss. So we use Shackle Foe here to lower her damage output, and then Leghold Trap will force her to be last on the next several turns. The thing that really sucks about this fight is there's so many ways you can make a mistake. Like, simply overusing your BP can just make this fight so much more dangerous. And so this is where the Hunter subclass really comes in handy. Being able to use Rain of Arrows, I usually get 3 to 5 hits a turn with Cyrus, and that's basically his main purpose in this fight. Tress's job is to heal, and Ulbricht's is to aggro. The combination of Insight, which puts all skills that turn on him, with Sidestep, which guarantees that he will dodge a skill, means that he basically will aggro and then just keep dancing around the enemy's attacks. Any single target skill will automatically go for him, and he'll just dodge. This is for each BP of Sidestep that I use, basically. Now, the ultimate goal of this fight is to break Lucia here on the 7th turn. So some of the menuing here is just a little slow. I really don't want to make a mistake at this point. So once again, lowering her damage output. We're not gonna Leghold Trap her again because I have just enough turns to guarantee I survive. And so one thing I actually haven't mentioned is the mercenary hired help actually increases my party's defense. Which means that she will do one more attack this turn, but nobody's going to die because she's been debuffed and my party has been buffed just enough. So using a pomegranate, pomegranates raise your BP. The largest give you 4 more BP, which is really handy. That extra hit is just for insurance, because there is a chance that Cyrus misses here. And now that she's broken, I can just unload. Anyone who's not a merchant will use large soul stones, because it does 5,400 damage. And then anyone with the merchant class can do a lot of damage with veteran soldiers. So here we have just enough damage to kill Lucia off on this turn. And by collecting, I get just enough for the final hired help. She has somewhere in the realm of about like 64,000 HP, which is a lot, and you really want to get that done on specifically turn 7 and 8. So that's it for the final boss. It's not it for the run. I have a little bit more than 2 minutes to go here. So she happened to be carrying the book that we were looking for. But we need to figure out some information about the book first. Again, this is actually pretty dangerous, as you'll see momentarily. So again, there are several mistakes that cost me like a 57 or a 56 with this run, but I was working so much on getting sub 1 hour that I think I'm decently content with this run. Because PB attempts for this character are frustrating, to say the least. So one more save, saves to reset the encounter rate. Oh, Steam opened and was apparently downloading an update. But that didn't cost me any frames. Nah, we're good. But this part's a little bit sketchy, and I ended up kind of taking a chance here. This is actually really unlucky to get an encounter here. Thankfully, I'm able to get away. If I had died here, it probably would have cost another, like, 30 seconds. I know, right? It looks... This looks pretty scary, but it's actually not too bad. This enemy buffs itself, and I'm able to get away. And so, we get to the end here, and I actually need Cyrus alive to scrutinize here. So now we finally learned the truth about the book, and that it was basically a warning, and that's really it for Cyrus's story. So in this very last text box here is time.
Huh?
And there we go. Sub 1, finally. I worked a lot to actually get this to the point where I feel like I have a lot more potential to do much better, but this is a very difficult category to grind out, so I think I'm content with Cyrus for now. If any sort of reroute comes about that makes this more stable, I might come back to it. But in the meantime, I'm going to be switching over to another character. I have learned the basics of the run for Tressa, which is what I'll be looking to do next. So, I'll leave this playing. I gotta go move some laundry, because I'm an idiot. But yeah, I did at least leave the recording of the credits on.